Thanks to those who just joined. If you can switch your audio and video off for the benefit of everybody else. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us at today's Gas Industry Award webinar organised by IGEM and EUA. My name is Simon Trollope. I'm the Head of Development and Knowledge Delivery at IGEM, and it's my pleasure to be your host for this afternoon's session. As hopefully you're aware, today's webinar is going to focus on the Company of the Year Award, and our thanks go to the award sponsor, Town Gas, for their support in this. The winner of Company of the Year for 2021 was ULC Robotics. So during this session, we'll be having an informal chat with their UK Operations Director, Sam Wilson, to find out a little bit more about the company, their ethos, and what has helped them succeed to win what they hopefully see as a prestigious award. So just to remind you, if you can switch off your video and microphones throughout the event, that will help everybody else during the course of today's session. We are recording the session, and obviously a copy of the recording will be made available to all the delegates after the event. If you'd like to post some questions for Sam, if you can do that, do in the chat function on the side of your screen. If you're unable to use the chat, if you just click on the raise your hand, and then we can come to you at some stage during the course of the afternoon's event. So before we start, just a little bit of information about today's category. So the title of Company of the Year is awarded to an organisation that has achieved sustained periods of growth and continued excellence. As part of the criteria, the judges were looking for details of what made the organisation stand out from the competition, some demonstrable commitment to continuous improvement, strong business performance, whether that's in terms of its growth and profitability, strong leadership, strong entrepreneurial flair, and obviously an organisation that invests in its people, encouraging them to achieve and maintain the highest standards of professional excellence. Obviously, as far as the gas industry is concerned, we also must have a clear focus on safety to safeguard both the employees, gas users and the general public. And also then a wider commitment to sustainability and social responsibility around decarbonisation of the gas network. So let's get started by introducing a little bit about ULC Robotics and, of course, Sam. So ULC works in the utilities sector, both in the UK and the US, and develop and deploy robotic systems for their operations and maintenance across these sectors. They're regarded as a pioneer in robotics as a service solutions and drone inspection for the energy, utility and industrial markets. Since its inception in 2001, the focus of ULC has always been the enhancement of utility operations and the support of infrastructure improvement. We're delighted to welcome Sam Wilson to join us today on behalf of ULC. And Sam has a 17-year career as an engineer, starting as a mechanical apprentice with the Ministry of Defence. And in his current role as UK Operations Director for ULC Robotics, he is responsible for the safe and efficient delivery of their work streams across the UK. He's also an active member of IGEM, and he's a winner of the Innovation Institute NEF Innovator of the Year Award back in 2014. So welcome to Sam, and welcome to ULC Robotics, and congratulations on winning this year's award. Just to sort of kick things off, can you just give me a little bit of background about ULC, and particularly how you work with the gas market?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Simon, for the introduction and giving us the opportunity to speak today. So I think your introduction to ULC was really good and really accurate. I guess what I can focus on a little bit is how we migrated across the Atlantic to be in the UK in GD1 and how our sort of core business started here. And really that surrounds the innovation funding mechanisms in GD1, which I think were a fantastic addition to the structures when they were initially introduced under the Rio framework. And also SysBot, which is the sort of the vehicle, if you like, for us establishing ourselves in the UK as an operational footprint. But that's also led to some R&D projects which have spun off of SysBot, and we've really grown that from there, which is great to see the client base building on the success of that initial innovation. So SysBot first came to the UK in 2013. That's when I first met SysBot, when I was at SGN. So I was a project manager at SGN and the innovation team, and I was tasked with looking at more efficient ways to manage the REPEX program and address the larger assets, so the tier 2 and tier 3 pipes. which are in troublesome locations and are extremely costly to replace and address if they're leaking or proactively. And SysBot was a great solution for that because it offered a way of remediating a length of asset, cast iron mains, from one small excavation, which dramatically reduces all those things that are a problem for the industry. So disruption, the environmental impact that we cause, the cost, and also keeping the gas flowing whenever we can. So that was a sort of segue into the UK. That was through an NIA-funded project, one for SGen and one for Cadent. And then I guess the hardest bit about establishing ourselves in the UK and getting past the first stage of demonstration was to get the commercial work underway. And we've been fortunate enough to grow the business from there to the point where in GD1, we completed about 130 kilometres of remediation using SysBot of tier 2 and tier 3 pipes. And that was predominantly in London, but we also worked in some really interesting locations underneath golf courses, underneath rivers, up in Scotland, down on the south coast, and all across. So it's been a really interesting ride, but one we've really benefited from, and SysBot was the vehicle for that, really.
And how does it vary in the US to the UK? Because obviously you're involved, I think, in other sort of utility sectors in the US that you're not yet in the UK.
Yes, it's a very different model to the UK when it comes to gas networks. We're fortunate in the sense that we've obviously grown relatively recently from obviously the one network, if you like. I know they're regionalised, but it was one network into the 4 main companies, and they work together as much as they can. And there's good communication past there, and there's the knowledge sharing, I think, is quite good in the UK. In the US, there's literally hundreds of different gas networks, and that's a real challenge to look at and address. We work in tens of different gas networks, predominantly on the east coast of the US, and we predominantly deploy SysBot and inspection activity over there. But we also do other types of pipeline remediation and inspection. Steam pipelines is a big part of our work, and also higher pressure stuff as well in the gas sector.
Okay. So looking at your website, obviously ULC's mission is all about responsible innovation for a sustainable future. So how do you go about embracing that and delivering on your mission?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something we try and think about all the time. And what I mean by think about it all the time is we get approached by all sorts of different clients, which is great, with different problems and different challenges, and all of them are valid. But we need to decide if that fits into our strategy as a business and whether it's going to add value down the line. And a big part of that, particularly in the UK sector, is the future of energy and it being sustainable. And one thing we always try and review and assess is that going to deliver on that message? And is there a commercial viable opportunity at the back end of that? Because the worst thing you can do with these innovation funding mechanisms is do innovation for innovation's sake and not deliver something off the back end of it. So I think we're always thinking about that and trying to tie that to that message and that goal. And fortunately, we've been successful at this point. I think it's difficult to do sometimes and difficult to tie into the wider message when you're in the nuts and bolts of developing a robot. But we feel a lot of our products do lead towards that message, and that's definitely part of our strategy in the gas sector, but also in others as well, the electric, water, and other areas that we work.
Okay. A little bit more sort of touchy subject, so we'll be careful on it. Obviously, the original submission was back in sort of 2019, 2020, because obviously we were due to hold this ceremony and give you this award this time of May last year. There's obviously been some changes in the industry, some moving from Rio 1 to Rio 2 as well. What, without going into too much detail on it, but how has that impacted on your business, and what have you had to do to adapt to some of the changes that have been going on in the industry? And then when you throw COVID into the mix as well, that probably adds another level of complexity for you.
It does, and it does for everyone. But I guess to summarise where we've come from, in GD1 we grew quite quickly, quite rapidly, and we had to resource up was the biggest challenge. So one of the things that is extremely unique about what we do is you can't just pick a guy off the shelf or nick him from another company to come and deploy SysBot. That isn't an option for us. So we spent a lot of time on resourcing and training people to do so. And we had about over 50 engineers at one point. Unfortunately, like many contractors at the end of GD1, the regulatory scene changed significantly, particularly when it came to the RepX activity, which a lot of our work was performed under as a budget, and our workload sort of downsized quite a bit as well. So what that's meant is we've had to unfortunately downsize our workforce to reflect that, and also speed up some of our plans to diversify our work set for the UK, because we were predominantly doing SysBot, and we were planning to diversify into some other products that I'm sure we'll come on to later. And that's been accelerated due to the change in the SysBot work demand. So where we're at is we're going for a change. A lot of contractors in the industry. I think there'll be some great things that come from it, because we'll have diversified much quicker than perhaps we would have done if work had continued. But there's also some real negatives, and we did lose some really good technicians that we brought into the industry, and apprentices, unfortunately, which is always regretful. But yeah, I'd say we had to react quite quickly to the change when the GD2 transition appeared.
Okay, so let's look at some of the positives of things which happened during GD1 and sort of which supported the growth of the business. So one of the categories I know the judges always look at is investing in people. What do you do to encourage them? What did you do differently in terms of recruitment? Because I think you had some different ideas to other parts of the industry, which I think was quite interesting. And then again, how do you actually go about maintaining the highest levels of sort of professional competence within the organisation?
Yeah, I think for us, diversity was the biggest key, and perhaps not in the more recent sense of diversity, but in regards to the backgrounds that our guys come from and ladies come from. So there's not, as I said, there's no one really that's ready off the shelf to deploy a system like we deploy. Yes. And our approach to this was twofold, really. We wanted people from different industries, because obviously we work in many different industries, not just a gas, to come into the sector and apply their knowledge. And also we had to build our own competency management system and training process to get these guys to a level where they're ready to deploy in what can be an extremely hazardous environment in the heart of London. So one of the things was getting that diversity through. And the other one was we really utilise using ex-forces guys, veterans that are coming out of the forces either immediately through the career transition programme, or those that have got links to that type of group, to bring people in that have a great engineering knowledge. They have a great engineering expertise in regards to the deployment of complex systems, and that they fit really well in our work environment, which is small crews working long hours together and having to have the maximum focus at all times. So that was our approach, really, to trying to harness that knowledge from across sector to apply it to the gas industry. And I think, coupled with the apprenticeship programme, which we also implemented, it's been it was really beneficial to the business.
Brilliant. Obviously, we'll go into this slightly more personally and in terms of professional excellence. Obviously, you're registered with RGM as an Eng Tech.
I am, yeah.
Obviously, we recognise that other colleagues, and some of them are on the call today, are also professionally registered through us. How do you feel that supports you as an individual and also the wider workforce, the fact that you are recognised as being a professionally registered engineer?
I think it's key. I think coming from the gas sector as a background, obviously I was defence sector first, and I went to the gas sector, and then obviously still in it heavily now with ULC. I think it adds a lot of value in many ways. I think for me personally, so I mean, I'm Eng Tech, have been for a while. I've sat and I've got a few committees in RGM and tried to support where I can, and I'm almost over the line with my chartership submission now as well. So that's been it's been tough, but I think it's been valuable. We've got some chartered engineers amongst the business, a lot of Eng Tech guys, and we utilise the training and the modules that are available through RGM to further our workforce. And that's particularly helpful as a reference when we've taken people from outside the industry to bring them in and have RGM's sort of development available is a really valuable tool for us, and we've utilised that wherever we can.
Brilliant. Obviously, safety is a key issue for the gas industry. It's something we're in the UK are immensely proud of, our safety record. And obviously that forms part of the criteria for Company of the Year. So what do you do to make sure that safety of both your employees, the gas sort of users themselves, and the general public is at the forefront of everything you do?
Yeah, and it has to be, doesn't it? And I think firstly, the technique we've developed has been focused on reducing that level of risk and exposure to what the industry does, which is ultimately work with a hazardous material. and work in very busy sectors to replace an aging infrastructure set. And hopefully our technique, and touch words, it has been this way, is dramatically reduce the types of injuries or negatives that come from that type of activity. I mean, we've had 0 incidents when it comes to safety concern with our guys. Members of the public, similarly, we've had very little, considering the locations we've worked. You know, Oxford Street and the likes of that, with footfall of millions a year. We've been really fortunate, and compliment our team to deliver that, and you know, haven't had to deal with any of the nasties that come along with it for the sector. I think with the technology, that's a key challenge as well. I think there's many things that can be seen as blockers to the deployment of technology in the sector. ATEX certification regulations are complicated, and perhaps not always the skill set of the industry immediately, and perhaps misunderstood sometimes how they can be utilised. And other things that link into the deployment of advanced kit needs to be looked at really, really closely. Yeah. And we do that internally, clearly, but we also do it with our clients. And I think that's part of the key to our success. We've been supported really well by SGN and Cadent when it comes to policy and engineering, asset management guys, and all those things that go into understanding the product, developing the procedures which surround it, and then deploying it live. It's about a team effort from everyone involved, not just us coming in and getting on with it. You know, it's the involvement of the wider team, and that's been a key to our success as well.
Brilliant. I've got loads more questions, but obviously just remind everybody that's on the call, if you do have any questions, if you pop them in the chat, so we can pose those to Sam as well. Whilst I wait for some to come in, one of the key areas for any business in terms of its growth and sort of place in any marketplace is about continuous improvement. So you've talked about Syspot as sort of like your entry into the UK. What have you done in terms of continuous improvement, and how are you going to embed it, and how do you embed that into your culture?
Yeah, no, great question. I think for us, particularly with innovation, and when you develop a new product, and anyone that's been involved in that will know that the first time you develop something and deploy it in the field, it's the most costly, expensive, time-consuming activity. And then over time, you refine it, you improve it, and that allows you to have that commercial benefit down the line and maximize the benefit. Yeah. And I think Syspot's a great example of that. You know, when we first deployed Syspot, we were sealing perhaps 1 joint a day, and it was, you know, it was a success that we'd done that in a long shift. And when we look at some of the small diameter pipes that we were remediating last year, 18-inch, for example, we could do 10, 11 joints a day, work consistently, really embed the improvements and battle-hardened system that we created, and just improve the way it deploys. So we really do focus on that for obvious reasons. There's that, and there's also ways you can improve techniques about expanding the asset group it can address. And we've done that with Syspot. Initially, it was 18-inch mains to 20-inch mains, and now we can do 15 all the way up to 36. And we've got bigger robots currently in development in our facility in the US. So it's about incremental improvement, understanding the steps you can take and not taking too big a steps each time, and making sure they're recorded and implemented repeatedly. And I think outside of that, you develop a lot of learning from deploying a system like Syspot, and you can embed that into other products. And we've got a number of other systems that have spun off of Syspot on our base knowledge, our core competence there, and increase what else can be done with robotic systems in our sector and also others. So it's about applying the knowledge you developed and continually improving it.
Thanks for that. Just to sort of remind people who are on the call or who will watch this later, there are quite a few webinars and previous presentations that we've had from the guys at ULC on Syspot, on RES, on all sorts of other bits of robotics technology available on RGM TV. So obviously, if you do want to watch them, we're not going to show any of those today because there's much more in-depth sessions that you can watch somewhere else, which is great. We talked about you and your professional sort of qualifications and registration with RGM. ULC are also industrial affiliates, so company members of RGM.
Yes. Yeah.
How has that helped you in terms of trying to grow the company and serving the sort of company's objectives and goals?
I think it links back to the competence development again, Simon. I think we've had good links there when it comes to professional registration. The information is available. We're obviously heavily linked to our clients and get updates from them, but we also like to see the direction of the industry, where best practice can be shared. We link that into RGM, and obviously the standards are a big factor of what we do when we're developing new technology as well, and trying to understand the asset group we're trying to address. So there's many links there. I think moving forward, as I guess we touched on again earlier, was the future of gas, and hydrogen is a big piece of that. We have heavy interest in that in the UK and abroad. And the knowledge that's available in Argen and the role they're playing is key to that as well. So we see it being a big part of our future, and it has been to this point as well.
Okay, so moving on a little bit, probably from CISPOT, what could you tell us anything about other projects you're currently working on, whether that's in the UK, in the US, or even in other sectors as well, that people may not know?
Yeah, there's a long list, so I'll try and make them concise and relevant. So I guess you touched on one, RES. So for those that don't know, RES is a robotic excavation system, and this is an NIC funded project to SGN. And the objective for RES is to automate the process of excavation, below ground scanning to complement that, and also what we can do remotely, and with the aim really of removing operatives from a really risky environment. And that's done by a robotic arm, an ABB robotic arm, which we've developed over the last few years to be applied to this type of environment. And we're planning to field trial that actually in the summer of this year. COVID has played a part because travel has been a real restriction for obvious reasons, and the system was actually developed by our engineering team that are based in New York. So once we're allowed to ship people over, and the robot will be here, and we'll be deploying it for SGN as part of the final piece of the trial and the project. And that's hopefully going to be in sort of Q3, Q4 this year. And we'll also be displaying it in No Dig Live as well for people that want to see the actual hardware itself. Yeah. So I guess that's our most, the one that's the most immediate for the UK sector. We have a number of other projects which are linked to the future of gas and mapping the network. That's going to be critical, in my view, to the success of hydrogen and how quickly we can embed that and roll that out. And we're also looking at other sort of pressure tiers of work as well. So we're looking at stuff like sleeve line inspection for pipelines that are high pressure pipelines that go under railways or bridges, wherever it may be, that have high risk of corrosion that isn't necessarily mappable. We've got some systems to work there as well. So the key really for us in the short term is RES, and we've got some mapping aspects using AI to improve those processes, and then looking at the other pressure tiers to try and add some value. I think wider than that, without listing them all off, there's some really unique stuff going on, and we've become really diverse actually in the last sort of 4 or 5 years when it comes to the project we've picked up. And they range from obviously the gas sector, the water sector, electricity, but renewables has been a big focus for us for obvious reasons. And solar farm installation and inspection is a big part of our processes and our focus area for us. And one of the quite unique ones, I guess, to give you an example, is linked to wind farms actually. And there's in Canada, there's Borealis, a name I can never say. Borealis Wind is the company, and essentially they have an issue where the turbines freeze up in the pretty harsh conditions that they're exposed to, and there's no heating elements to the side of the earlier installations. So they basically have to de-ice them manually or wait till they defrost and they can use them again. Right. So we've actually developed a system that crawls inside of the turbine blade, bores out a hole, and then installs filaments in there to heat the blades so they can use them all year round. And that was quite a interesting, unique project, yep, which ULC are involved in. So that's sort of an example of the diversity that we've got going. You mentioned the website earlier, Simon. There's also a very cool video on there of a project we did with Facebook connectivity. And that's focused on developing a system to crawl along power lines and wrap around fiber optic cable. And the objective is to get fiber connectivity to areas that just don't have it, but they have basic power infrastructure without the cost of installation or the rest of it that comes with that process. So yeah, we're pretty diverse when it comes to the type of work we're looking at. But I think if you go on the website, you'll see they all sort of tie to that future of gas and also the wider renewable sector.
Okay. Sort of looking back, to when you first came into the market, what was the biggest challenge that you faced as an organisation? And then secondly, were there any sort of major barriers that were put in your way that you found difficult to overcome, and sort of lessons learned from that?
Yeah, good question. I guess there are many. Maybe some of them small, some of them large. I think one of the things that's a common perception, hopefully we've changed that a little bit actually in the industry, is that robots aren't suited for the frontline gas industry. Too expensive, won't work, not worth looking at. And CISPOT had that challenge initially. it's clearly not cheap to deploy an advanced robot in a live environment in the heart of a city. But I think when you benchmark that against what the current techniques are, or were the techniques on the market, and what the alternatives are to doing that in some locations, it is very, very viable. And understanding that and getting that message across without it being dismissed offhand initially, it can be a challenge. And I'd say we suffered with that quite a bit early on in Sysbots being embedded in the UK, and we do abroad as well with the US and other countries that we plan to operate in. So that's one. Regulatory change is obviously a big one, and we've gone through that for the GD1, GD2 transition, and that's looking like it's going to change soon as people settle into GD2, but it's still going to be a slog for us, unfortunately, as with many contractors. And I guess the other ones are just getting the right people to deploy our systems and resourcing it, the right skill set, the right willingness, and the right want to deploy a pretty advanced system in a challenging environment. And that's always a challenge as well. But thankfully, given we've done over 130 kilometres of mains remediation in what was 4 or 5 years once we were embedded in the UK, we've achieved that with quite a lot of success, thankfully.
One of the things I remember when we were doing, I think, a consultation on GD2, one of the things that kept coming back from the supply chain was how difficult they felt it was to take something they deployed with one network into another network. Have you seen a change in how the networks are now working to sort of adopt different techniques that may have been sort of trialed in one area but not necessarily deployed nationally? Yeah,
I guess I've got quite a unique view because I've been on
both sides
of the network and I've been on the side of the contractor. I think at the start of GD1 there was a big challenge there. Naturally, competition comes into it, and there's sharing of information, but what information gets shared is sometimes piecemeal, and the important stuff sometimes isn't. I think it's fair to say. And that isn't just the fault of the networks, that's the contractors as well that need to be open about that and try and enable those relationships. I think it has improved though through GD1, and I think it's going to improve more in GD2 because there's lessons learned by the networks, by Ofgem, the regulator who hold the purse strings, and also how the process of embedding technology has improved from the learning of that. I think there's still a way to go. And I think embracing innovation is critical to the success of the networks. I think the gas network is very resilient and is very safe compared to others around the world. So I think we'll credit to it for that. But some risks sometimes need to be taken, and they don't have to be outlandish risks. Small steps can be taken to try and understand what's out there and how it can be applied. And that can still improve. But I think my personal view is that it is getting there. And the networks are slowly working together a lot more to embed the benefits as wide as possible, as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm coming up to my last few questions. So again, if anyone does have any questions they want to post for Sam, just drop them in the chat and I can ask them accordingly. So looking towards the future, and you can do this you do both from your personal point of view and from your company point of view. So first of all, where do you see the future of engineering? And then secondly, where do you see the future for the energy sector? And I'll treat it in the wider sense as the energy rather than just necessarily gas.
Yeah, wide questions. I guess engineering, if we focus on the sector for a minute, and it doesn't really apply just to gas, but electric and water, I think the level of competence and the age profile really needs to be improved. And that's not an insult to the generations that have gone before and have done an outstanding job of maintaining the network. But there's an age gap there. I think that's obvious, and everyone knows that. IGEM have done a lot to raise that concern and try and improve it. So there's a risk there. I think networks are starting, and there's younger generations coming through, making me feel much older because I thought I was the younger generation, but evidently I'm not anymore. And that has improved, but it needs to go further. I'd say that's a challenge, and that applies to upper management, but also grassroots, boots on the ground guys, which the industry used to be very good at training apprentices, and it was the envy of many other sectors. Perhaps that's dropped away quite a bit and slowly coming back, but the rate needs to improve. And that transition into the future of gas is so key to the gas sector predominantly. I think from our perspective, there's lots of opportunities to harness innovation to either speed that up or improve understanding of the network to make the right decisions as we move forward. And perhaps they haven't been utilised just yet. I guess the good news is that there is innovation funding available in GD2, which is heavily focused on the future of gas, which I think is right. Yep. And that just needs to be utilised to the best of the network's abilities, using collaboration to harness it. I think for the wider sectors linking sort of innovation and the sector ULC are in, we're doing a lot of work now with water companies who are in their current AMP period, are sort of seeing some similarities to the Rio frameworks and how that's worked in the past for the gas industry. And they're starting to benefit and realise what they could implement using that sort of de-risked money for innovation. And that will start to be embedded wider than that. So the hope is that it will continue to grow. But I think the engineering sector needs to invest in the future in many more ways than just the infrastructure. It needs to invest in the people as well. And perhaps a naive view by some is that robotics is the opposite to that, but really it isn't. The key to our deployment and our success is our guys and the guys and girls that deploy it. And the same goes for the gas networks.
Yeah. I think the other encouraging bit with Rio 2 is quite a lot of the funding is actually about the future of energy, not just the future of gas, because I think at one stage it was quite heavily skewed badly from our point of view as the gas industry in favour of the electricity sector. And I think that one thing that thankfully they did in the end was actually rebalance that to talk about future energy systems rather than do a clear sort of demarcation line between gas and electricity, because that just wasn't going to solve the problem.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think just to add to that, Simon, and I'm sure many engineers in here will know this, but the infrastructure that's in the ground that's laid by the Victorians is still in outstanding condition. Yes, it needs some maintenance. Yes, it needs some inspection, but it's still world leading. And to walk away from that is crazy when it comes to the energy trilemma. And I think what's available on the market now and can be available in the future needs to be utilised to realise that and make the most of it.
Okay, so final one for me, and it probably links quite nicely, but you talked about the industry needed to invest in skills and the right sort of people to help through the transition and the move towards net zero. So if you had one message for RGM and EUA about what we could do to support the industry moving forward, what would it be?
I think RGM is transitioning as well at the moment, and I think there's a realisation they need to support the future of the industry. They always have, clearly, and that isn't a dig, but I think there's a realisation that it needs to modernise a little bit and change with the times, not only on the way the industry's going, but also the age profile and the type of members that are now part of RGM, and the need to develop people with those skill sets and harness the knowledge of the elder generations and pass it down. So I think that's key from RGM from my perspective. I think we utilise a lot of the RGM training material. That's really, really helpful. The standards are great, and they need to continue to do that. And perhaps just utilise knowledge from other sectors as well and work with them wherever they can to embed it. And I think if that happens and all the engines networks work together, that would be a great benefit. Yeah,
and hopefully, as I say, we have our new CEO joining us in about 2 or 3 weeks' time. So Ollie Lancaster, currently at Wales and West. So again, from our point of view, that's great. We've got somebody from the industry, somebody who understands the industry and is passionate about engineering, which is great. And obviously, hopefully, we'll look to bring some of the things that you just talked about in terms of the transition of RGM as well as everybody else as we move forward. So I don't know, there's no more questions have come in from anyone else. So if no one else doesn't have it, if you don't have any further questions, I'll probably bring the session to a close. So thank you to Sam for joining us. Thanks to Town Gas for sponsoring the category. Many congratulations to ULC for winning this award. Sam and I had a quick chat this morning, said it's a great shame because we've ended up putting the Company of the Year award as the last award because we always sort of see it as one of the most prestigious ones that as part of its sequence. And it's a great shame that obviously we couldn't present that in person. And importantly, as Sam pointed out, is you couldn't celebrate it as an organisation collaboratively. So hopefully we'll get a chance to do that in the not too distant future. So thanks to the teams of both RGM and EUA for helping to promote today's event, and thank you for joining us. To find out more about the sort of rest of the series, please visit our website. So again, once again, congratulations to ULC. Thanks to Sam. Thanks to everybody for joining, and I hope to see you again soon. Thanks very much.
Thanks for hosting, Simon. That's been really appreciative. And if anyone wants any more information from us, the website's got plenty of stuff on, or I'm more than happy to field any questions after the session.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sam.
Thanks a lot. Cheers, Simon.
Cheers.